Welcome everybody back to There Will Be Bets. This is your first full week post football, so we're back. We're in basketball shape as we discussed last week. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Jake LaSalle, Drew LaSalle. I am your host Cole Oxane. And boys, it was a week. I mean, really, there's been a lot that's happened in the last week since we recorded. We did have the Super Bowl. I think that ended up being an okay day for all of us, given everything we gave out last week, plus some futures we still had riding. And then, honestly, it's been an up and down week in basketball. So how's the week been for you guys? I know I'm enjoying like the full-on basketball everyday grind. It's definitely different than football. I'm enjoying it myself, but I'm a college basketball guy, NBA. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It hasn't been as fun. But how's it been for you guys? Are we enjoying the grind? Are we sad football's over? Where are the vibes at today?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of mixed feelings overall. It's been an up and down week. I was talking with Jake before we hopped on, I think I'm going to need to take a look at the volume of bets that I've been going with the last maybe year. But yeah, definitely a sad time, but excited. A lot of really, really good college games that have been playing out, and really all the marquee games that we've seen the last few weeks have lived up to the hype. They've been going down to the wire with a bunch of drama going into the end.
Yeah, it is a tough moment, obviously, when football ends. And last week was just really tough in particular because, as we've been transitioning, since the start of the playoffs into more of a basketball mindset. I've been looking at a lot of NBA stuff, and last week was just the worst week to bet anything in the NBA because it's right before the All-Star break. A lot of teams are just, starters are playing only 20 minutes, for some teams and 30 minutes for other teams. Bench players are playing in the high 20 minutes randomly. Like, it was just, last week was just a turning table of you had no idea what you were doing. So kind of had a bad NBA week in that regards, with just a lot of people didn't play, or a lot of unders just didn't got crushed because the minutes were just weird. So hopefully as we get past this all-star break, get into next week, we'll reset and get back on the NBA grind as expected.
As a guy who's a college basketball over NBA guy, weeks like this are where I think we win the argument entirely until the NBA playoffs start, because Drew is 100% right. We've had marquee matchups every night of the week, whether it's mid-majors, whether it's the high majors, whether it's the top of the top. They've all lived up to the expectation. It started with Monday. You had the Kansas comeback against Arizona, no Darren Peterson. During the middle of the week, we had some other big games in multiple conferences. It's not like it's just one conference leading the way. You've got, Nebraska coming back from down 20 against Purdue, forcing overtime, ending up losing. Then we get later in the week, you get to see St. Louis come out and put up a dominant performance on Friday night. And then Saturday, as always, was just loaded with top matchups. And it's just been so fun. And then meanwhile, the NBA, like Jake said, it's been a disaster. You got 20 teams that are load managing, and you got 10 teams that are tanking. And there's maybe a couple of teams worth watching. I don't know, Sacramento's kind of just floating in the void, at least trying. But other than that, I don't really know what's going on with the NBA. And then we'll talk about it more in our NBA talk, but the NBA All-Star, they buried it at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, and I didn't even know what happened. By the time the dunk contest was happening, when I was learning stuff was even happening on Saturday. So, you want to talk about just the dichotomy here. I think college basketball just continues to prove it's a superior product, at least until late April when the playoffs get going for the NBA. So that's my takeaway. I've been enjoying the hell out of it. I think it only gets better when we get closer to March, so I'm very excited for it. And I think that basketball was refreshing coming off of football, especially, we won't touch too much on the Super Bowl, but boring Super Bowl. It kind of played out in a lot of ways we expected, which was unders. And, other than Kenneth Walker, nobody did anything anyway. So, to have this excitement, I know people talk about that we should have, one college basketball game scheduled after the Super Bowl at 10 p.m. I know it's like a Barstool Big Cat special where he says, you need to have a wean off of the football season by having, a late tip on Sunday night. I could get behind that, too. But I think Monday did it for us. So, overall, it's been fun. That doesn't mean it's been all fun. I know Jake was ranting a little bit there. We'll jump into our rant segment before we dive into each college basketball and NBA. But I'm going to open it up first, and this really hits home because we're recording this Sunday morning. Yesterday on Saturday, I had multiple plays just get hosed by poor play down the stretch, whether it was missed free throws, whether it was the inability to handle the press. And I know we used to say that they were just kids and, give them a break. They are still learning. They're still getting better at the game. They're not kids anymore. They're getting paid $50,000, $100,000. Some of these guys are getting paid millions of dollars to play college basketball now. And on top of that, they're not kids. I mean, some of them are 18, 19, but a lot of these guys are 22, 23, 24, 25, 30 years old in some cases. You need to be able to handle the press, and you need to be able to hit your free throws. Virginia, yesterday, was up 7 against Ohio State, missed the front end of 3 different one-on-ones, ended up not covering the 4 points. NC State, my God, they were up 7 with 38 seconds left and lost the game to Miami because they just turned it over 4 separate times on their own side of the court, not handling the press. They missed free throws too. Even earlier this week, there were other teams, whether it was down late, blow a lead, or could have covered a small number and end up not covering because they just can't hit their free throws. They can't handle the press. Maybe it's coaching. Maybe these coaches are just too afraid to work on all of these fundamental sides of the game because, they're limited in their practice time and all these guys are professionals now. But my God, it feels like it's worse than ever. And yet the product has been better than ever because of it. But it's been frustrating. It's the ups and downs of basketball. So I can live with it. Sometimes you're going to be on the right end, sometimes you're going to be on the wrong end, but it hurts. It really hurts when you know that you need 1 or 2 free throws to cover a game, and before the guy even shoots, he could be a 90% shooter. It's going back iron. You just know it. So I went through about 4 of those yesterday on Saturday. It was definitely the difference between a winning day and a losing day for me. So that's my rant out of the way. I don't know if either of you guys want to get anything else off your chest before we really dive in deep, but the floor is yours.
Nothing specific for me. The NC State one was really tough because you felt like you were going to be on the right side of the number, let alone them just finding a way to win that game. But I do think it leads to maybe some value for them against North Carolina next week. But yeah, there's situations like that, and it's the classic gamblers thing. You always remember the ones that hose you. You never remember the ones that ended up benefiting you in that regard. But yeah, tough draw on that one.
I don't have any particular rant, mainly on the NBA, just like we talked about, just teams either sitting players or stuff like that. It wasn't even a sitting player, but one of the things that did frustrate me was the last day of the NBA. I added a late rebounding play on Daniel Gafford, which his number was at 6.5. Gets 6 rebounds in the first half, gets hurt in the first play of the second half. Now, I don't know if it was a serious injury. I think he's playing next week. So it was probably just like I said, like he got hurt a little bit and they're like, you know what? Not going to risk it. Just on to the next game. Like we'll sit you for next week.
Yeah, definitely probably a precautionary injury there, which the NBA is riddled with that. Now, college basketball has been suffering from that too. I mean, Darren Peterson. Talk about precautionary. That guy gets some sniffles and they don't let him play. And so we're kind of seeing it translate down to these elite college players as well, but it is definitely a problem. Load management is a huge problem, and it somehow is again started to affect college basketball a little bit more. But definitely a worthwhile rant. And I mean, again, we don't want to blame injuries for plays not hitting. That's obviously a toxic behavior, but it is tough, especially when you see these things that guys might play through. Let's say if it was an important game for seeding or anything like that, where, would he have gone? Okay, that just hurts.
No, obviously you can't control injuries. Injuries happen. It sucks when you lose a bet on injuries. That was not, I guess, the main point of it. The main point of the rant was also like in particular to the NBA in general. We've talked about this. Like, you can imagine the fans paying all this money, and then like there was a game last week that the Lakers sat Ayton, Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. Like, could you imagine paying to go to that game and they're just not sitting?
It's a high school game.
Yeah, like you're not even playing NBA players at that. I mean, they are, but like
they were playing the Spurs too. Like it was a marquee game. And they just literally sat everybody.
Yeah, they're like,
well, and then what made it even worse was in retaliation, the Spurs like limited minutes on guys too, and it just became ugly. Like, so because the Spurs know, okay, we can get the job done. I think Wemby scored 20 in the first quarter, and then they just shut him down. It's like, okay, great. I at least get to see a generational Wemby performance tonight. Then they go, nope, we're done. It's brutal. All right, well, we got a couple of things off our chest. Before we dive into our deep discussion of college basketball and NBA for the week, we want to ask you guys, if you are enjoying the video and have been enjoying our past videos, go ahead and leave a like on this one. Also, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell as well so you never miss an upload from us here. We're going to be putting out our episodes every week, breaking down all of the action we saw, all of the upcoming action for the next week, and we're going to do that all the way through March Madness, all the way through the NBA playoffs. So we're just getting started with basketball here. So again, leave a like, hit that subscribe button if you want to stick with us through the entirety of the basketball season. All right, so we're going to jump right in. We're not going to waste any time. College basketball, we touched on a few things with the rants in the opening here, but there are definitely about 5 or 6 things we really want to cover that are kind of our major points coming out of this week. We're not going to get to everything. There's just too many games, too many teams to get to everything. These are just kind of the highlights of what we took out of it, what we think is going to be the biggest impact, and some fun stuff that, again, long-term might not be the most important, but, some of these storylines are just fun to cover. So we'll jump into all these here. I think the biggest story maybe the two biggest stories. I could go back and forth, but the one I want to start with is North Carolina losing Caleb Wilson to a wrist injury. It officially came out. Obviously, we saw it happen middle of the week this week in the Miami game. No one was really sure. He did miss the last few minutes. Came out. He's going to have surgery. Looking like it's probably going to be a season-ending injury. Maybe, some reports are out there that he could maybe be back for the tournament, but he's an NBA prospect. I think at the end of the day, he's going to make the decision for himself. He's going to protect himself. At least hopefully he does, right? So chances are North Carolina now has no Caleb Wilson. What does this mean for North Carolina moving forward? This team was probably going to be a top 4 seed. They were really the only true competitor to Duke in the ACC. And now all of a sudden, this team probably is more like a bubble team. Now, they're not going to be on the bubble because they've already got their resume of wins, but they're probably a bubble level team without Caleb Wilson. And I think this dramatically shifts not only prospects for a couple of teams in the ACC to maybe make a run in the ACC tournament, but this is huge news for whoever ends up with this North Carolina team in their region in the bracket, because again, they probably still get a top 5-6 seed would be my guess. And now all of a sudden that is not the scary 5 or 6 that they could be if they were on that line. So I don't know what we make of this, guys. I think he's probably a first team All-American level player. So this is just huge news. And I feel like it kind of flew under the radar because again, there's just so much going on in the basketball world at this point. But do we think North Carolina has any chance at being a legitimate Final Four contender anymore, or am I being too extreme maybe? I don't know, but this feels very important.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, Caleb Wilson, we talked about it last week with that performance against Duke, really, even though they were down 12 at half, kept them in the game in that game against Duke, and obviously they end up coming back, and you look back now, and that's probably the win that ends up like sealing them in the tournament if they really start to struggle without him. You saw they handled Pitt yesterday, maybe a spot where you're down your best guy and the rest of the team kind of rallies in a one-game spot. I already touched on my love for NC State this week against them. I think it's on Wednesday they play, but yeah, huge injury. Don't think that North Carolina is a viable Final Four team. I think this is a weekend one team and very matchup dependent on who they get after that. I'm not a Hubert Davis guy, so not exactly trusting him to right the ship without Wilson.
If you look at like kind of a college football comparison, do they treat this almost like they treated Florida State a couple years ago when Jordan Travis got hurt? And do we see the committee like punish this team if they lose a couple of games? So, okay, overall, if you were looking at the record, every team has a couple of bad losses. Do we think they're going to get punished for if they have some bad losses? And maybe they don't happen. Maybe the talent level's still there. But do we think they're going to get punished and not be like a 5 or 6, but like a 7 or an 8?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about it like that. You haven't really seen, at least off the top of my head, I can't think of like a comparable situation where I guess maybe like Iowa State was that last year or 2 years ago. They were down their point guard going into the tournament, and I feel like their seed was like pretty emblematic of where they were supposed to be. So like the committee didn't really factor it in, but I might even be thinking like they didn't announce it until after the seed was released. Maybe I'm spinning in my head about it, but yeah, maybe you see them get dinged a little bit because they pick up a bad loss or two, and just like the vibes around how they're trending toward the end of the season are just a lot worse than they would have been otherwise.
All right, well, the next topic, and this is probably our fault. We probably jinxed them a little bit, but we were just talking about how we thought Arizona was the best team in the country. So what did they do? They went and lost twice this week. Now, given neither of these losses were terrible losses, I think, especially the Kansas one, we predicted it. Obviously, the no Darren Peterson of it changed things a little bit, but Kansas is a really good team. It's really hard to win in Fog Allen Fieldhouse, and Arizona was due for a loss. Now, what was a little more surprising was on Saturday, we saw them as a pretty substantial favorite lose in the McKale Center, where they rarely lose, to Texas Tech. Now, give Texas Tech the credit. I think they're a legit title contender. I think JT Toppin is an absolute dog, and they play up to competition. They have taken on the biggest of big dogs this year. They've beat Duke, they've beat Arizona, they've beat Houston. This team is not scared to play anyone in the country, and they show up when it matters most. Grant McCasland is an absolute great coach. But all of a sudden, you're starting to worry just a little bit about Arizona. Koa Pete has struggled. Braden Burries has been up and down. They've kind of had to rely on Jaden Bradley and Karchenkov and all of these other guys who are solid players but are not supposed to be their elite top-tier players. And I think this is just naturally what happens in a college season, but are we worried about the Cats? Is there something that we missed in our breakdown, or is this just more of a typical, this happens every year It's going to take a couple of losses. It's just that gauntlet of the schedule doesn't get any easier for them. So where do we think the Cats are at? Should we be worried? Should we be selling our stock? What do you guys think?
No, I think like if you're looking at those two games and selling everything on Arizona, I think that's a bit of an overreaction. We've said it. We even said it last week. They're not one of those teams that we've seen in like the past years, like that Kentucky team or something like that, that is just an absolute, or the UConn team that's an absolute going to run over everybody and win every game. Like, this is college basketball. You're going to lose games. They're not that much better than everybody, but they are, I think, still the best team. Both the games, obviously, they lost close games. I think, if anything, this was good for Arizona bettors because they get this wake-up call. Like, they were probably riding a little high, thinking they were just that much better than everybody, and now they get set back to reality. Now they got to refocus. This is the Big 12. The Big 12 is the toughest conference. You realize that all these teams are title contenders, like you said. So I think it's a good refocus, and I've said this before, like if you're going to lose 50-50 games, like games by 2-3 points throughout the year in college basketball, it just happens. Better to get them out of the way now than in the tournament. So I think if anything, this would be the time to buy in more on Arizona because you might be getting a better number.
I don't disagree. The only thing I will add is that, yes, both games were close. They were up 6 with 3:30 left yesterday. Look like they may even have a chance to cover, let alone not lose the game outright to Texas Tech. But with Pete now injured and struggling anyway, they're really reliant on the mid-range game, which is not necessarily something you want to live on if you're like this high ceiling national championship level team. There have been teams that have done it and won titles, but it's not necessarily something that I'm loving as I'm watching some of these last few games. So something to keep an eye on if Pete is going to be out for a little bit longer, or if he's going to be continuing to be not a focal point in the offense, like having some kind of post-game offense that like we work through him, I think is a little concerning if we're going to have to rely on our guards to make plays in the mid-range and all of that. So this is not a gifted three-point shooting team either. So a little bit of concern heading down the stretch, especially the way their schedule stacks up the next few weeks.
I will admit, watching the game, I got some bad flashbacks of watching Arizona have to play mid-range game through a European guy, watching Karchenkov be the focal point of the offense in the second half. It was screaming Tubelis era, and that's not an era that you want to go back to if you're Arizona. That's just not an efficient tournament style play. So I agree. I think really the key, especially this has been the truth, and it will just be even bigger, is it's all about Bradley. I think if he can shoot a little bit better from three, he can be a little bit more the focal point of the offense. I think that's how this team survives. And I think you just have to kind of get your A game out of Burries from here on out. He was kind of touted to be probably the top freshman they had. I know it was kind of a debate between him and Pete, but it's his show now. I mean, Pete's going to be coming back off of that ankle injury. You don't know how that's going to treat him. It could be some limited minutes. So I think those are your two guys. And then I think it's just going to be a little bit of a test of Tommy Lloyd. We were talking last week. We think he's a pretty decent coach. I think now let's go ahead and show it. You might have to adjust some things. You might have to play a little differently. You're going to have to handle some adversity for the first time all year. I think it's a good test. I don't think they're out of it. I kind of agree with what Jake said. What does scare me, and I'm actually going to lead this into the next topic we'll talk about, is the Big 12 is so good this year. You could probably make the argument that other than probably Duke and Michigan, you have 5 of the 7 best teams in the country in the Big 12. And again, depending on how you feel about Duke or Michigan, you could probably make an argument that a few of them are ahead of those teams. And this conference is tough, and there's a world where Arizona doesn't end up on the 1 line all of a sudden. And that's a crazy thought, but it's the truth, especially depending on what happens in a couple of these other marquee matchups in the Big 12. But the question I have for you guys is, would you take the Big 12 versus the field when it comes time for March Madness based on what you've seen right now? So that essentially means you get Texas Tech, Houston, Arizona, Iowa State, Kansas. Those are, in my opinion, the 5 real title contenders, plus you get a few other teams that are going to be tournament teams who could make, a Cinderella type run. Then that would mean you get UConn, you get Michigan, you get Duke, you get a few of these other teams out of the Big Ten, like Illinois, like Purdue, any of those schools, go down to the SEC, you would get your Florida, Arkansas, like these schools. So that's kind of the list. Is would you take that Big 12 or would you take the field at this tournament? I kind of think I would take the Big 12 personally, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Am I overrating the Big 12? Is it a case of last year how the SEC was so good? Is it kind of just the same thing, but with the Big 12 this year? That's kind of what I think. But what do you guys think about that?
Last point you mentioned there, like parallel to last year's SEC teams, like that was the talk going into the tournament, was how dominant the SEC was. There were some Big 12 teams that were in the mix, but I think, yeah, it's maybe even a more skewed with this Big 12 version, just because we already talked about our reservations with UConn, with Michigan. We're not necessarily a buyer of anybody in the ACC, including Duke. So you left out BYU on that Big 12 group as well. I think they have the ceiling to be a Final Four, maybe not national title, but yeah, there's so much talent in the Big 12, and if they offer a line on that, I'll be curious to see what the odds are, because I definitely would lean towards taking the Big 12 against the rest of the NCAA tournament field.
I am not a really big buyer in the Michigan, the UConn, the Duke this year, so I would lean the Big 12. Now, that could be a homer view, Arizona view, but I just think they're, like you said, there's just so much talent. They have so much depth. They're probably going to have like 7 or 8 tournament teams, and at least maybe even more, and at least 5 of them are title contender teams. I'd be curious to see what the line would be, because as I said in the last week, I do think that this year could be a surprise upset kind of year. So like now the top teams that we're mentioning, Michigan would probably skew that line, so you wouldn't get any value out of it. But I think it's like either one of those big 5-7 teams, or I think that you could see like a surprise winner out of it. Now, maybe that is a Big 12, like lower seed team, but I feel like if you're going to look at tournament betting, you either like want to take one of those top tier in the Big 12, or you take just a long shot. I feel like that's the play you play this year.
Yeah, I mean, as far as title goes, I think the long shot, I know UConn was a 4 seed a few years ago, but even we're in a different era now than we were just a few years ago. I think the long shot, like the 5-6 seeds, are probably by the wayside for the most part. I think just in this era with loaded rosters, it's got to be one of the top 10. But again, like we just said, if half or more of the top 10 is in the Big 12, then sure, give me the Big 12 in that matchup, right? Like if we really broke it down nitty gritty, at least 5, if not 6 or 7 of your top 10 are going to be Big 12 teams for sure. Absolutely. So I probably lean with you guys. I would take the Big 12 as well. The only team that truly actually does like legitimately scare me outside the Big 12 is probably Duke, believe it or not. I think that with the elite level of play you get out of Cameron Boozer and the level of coaching John Shire provides, I think they are as good as any of these Big 12 teams. Now, again, tournament setting's crazy. You just never know. But that's like the one team. Michigan, I'm still not sold on Michigan, even though the analytics say that I should be.
See, I get what you're saying, Cole, with the whole, like, we might be done with the, underdog big win. They said the same thing when NC State won their title, when there was Jordan and, this Houston team and all these teams that everybody was talking about that just their talent is too much. And a team just slithered through.
The difference is they could not pay the 8th, 9th, and 10th man on those North Carolina and those Houston rosters. That's what the difference is now. It's not the top.
But
like,
the thing
top
is, there's
talent
like
is still
40
dispersed.
teams that still pay their players. 50
Yeah,
teams.
but it's just the depth is so much. It's why it was so chalky last year. Is the depth is so crammed on these high rosters where like you're just seeing 7-8 dudes deep. Like, I mean, the Arizona Texas Tech game is a perfect example of that. Like, both those teams are so loaded that you're just not getting upset unless it's the right formula.
But dude, it's like there's also like we're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds playing a game, like game.
We are, and that's why the
lose.
NCAA tournament is fantastic. But it's just after seeing what we saw last year, I think now NC State is the type of team, like using that example, it's at least a Power 5 team, and that's what it's going to have to be.
Yeah.
I don't think the true Cinderellas are going to be around anymore. You're not going to see your Wichita States. You're not going to see your Loyola of Chicago. Like,
well, I think they can win a game or 2 games.
yeah, and I mean, It's always possible. And like, we love St. Louis this year. And I think St. Louis is like maybe the one type of team because they have a lot of guys that they've been able to build through at least the portal. Now they're not getting paid as much, but they at least have a lot of portal guys they brought in the last 2 years. But it's going to take a Power 5 team who just struggles most of the year and then puts it together late. Like, that's what it's going to have to be. I mean, I guess using NC State as an example, that NC State team 2 years ago that made the Final Four run and lost to Purdue is a perfect example of that. Like, they were terrible all year, and they just managed to put it together for a little bit of a stretch because they had some talent. So, I mean, you might be right, but I do think the days of Cinderella
Also,
are
the
more
perfect
limited.
draw could happen. Like, because there's these teams that are overhyped, like, like UConn or stuff like that, you could see like 5, Big 12 teams in the same bracket and just tear each other apart.
Yeah, that could end up. I know the way at least they schedule the tournament is usually they try to avoid like first 2-round matchups as much as they can.
Yeah, but
At least when it comes to those top teams. No, it absolutely could happen. Which that leads into the other team I want to talk about. A team that I just don't think we should have any respect for is Gonzaga. Like, this team, there have been years past where they were dominant, right? Like, some of the teams that went and played for the title or made the Final Four, very good teams. This team's fraudulent. They are just spotting points to every team in the WCC. Should have lost to Santa Clara on Saturday. They're struggling. They lost to Portland. I mean, come on. A 22-point favorite. This roster is just not constructed well. Like, Graham Ike is like 29 years old, and he's not 29, but he's like 23 years old, and he's been there forever, and he just consistently can't stay healthy and struggles at times. They brought in Tyon Grant Foster, who great player. We love him forever because he cashed the final leg of a round robin for us when he was at Grand Canyon, but dude cannot shoot, and he's such an inefficient offensive player. There's just no rhythm, and like that Mark Few flex offense just doesn't look right, and they're going to be a team I'm absolutely going to fade come March. Absolutely, without a doubt, we'll be fading Gonzaga. So that's a team I just don't think has it. If we're talking about fraudulent, taking the Big 12 versus the field, do not include Gonzaga in your field play. If you're banking on them, do not include them. That's all I can say about Gonzaga.
The one thing, it's hard to make a comparison, obviously, because like it's not the same. But like the team that comes to mind is I don't want to like say anything like they're not a good team, but like is Notre Dame. Like, it's like a lot of years you don't know how good they are because they don't play the teams. You just think they're good based on like their previous years, kind of like Gonzaga. Like, you just think they're good, but because they've never been in one of those big conferences, that like they don't play the level of talent. So like you just aren't sure, but because they have that resume and like, tradition never graduates, you have to, like, people always rate them so high. And that's like the same thing I think of like Notre Dame sometimes. Is like, I need to see it, but everybody says every year they're like, oh, they're a title contender. And then like they don't play anybody, and then they lose games to teams that are like fringe title contenders, but yet everybody keeps saying like they're a title contender. So like that's my thought process when I see Gonzaga, and I agree with you. I think they're not that good this year, and people are just overvaluing them.
Yeah, and I mean, so in past years, everyone has been critical of them not playing anybody, but at least they're just drumming the WCC, winning by 30, 40 every night. Like, they're struggling in the WCC. They got pantsed by Michigan in the Thanksgiving tournament. They lost by like 40-something to Michigan, who that loss has not aged particularly well. I mean, Michigan's good, but it's not like, oh my God, Michigan is just belting everybody. So that looks terrible. Again, they just are struggling with teams that and we are just talking about it. We think that the depth has been increasing on these top rosters, and you're seeing the opposite happen to Gonzaga, where you would think, okay, a school like Gonzaga should just be chokeholding the WCC now with the level of depth and the fact that they can pay players and do all this stuff, and the opposite's starting to happen. So I'm not sold at all. I think probably you're going to see like a second round exit out of this team would be my guess. Like, they're going to be a 4 seed or a 5 seed, maybe end up playing one of those Big 12 schools. Like, if you could get like a BYU versus this Gonzaga team, give me BYU for everything. I would love that matchup. So we'll see how that plays out. The final team, and we keep talking about them because they absolutely deserve the attention, but Miami of Ohio had an interesting thing come up this week. I don't know if you saw this, but they're undefeated right now. They're first place in the MAC. Obviously, their net rating and everything's not amazing because they play in the MAC. They finally have crept into the top 150 on KenPom just because they keep winning. We tried to fade them on Friday night with Ohio. Didn't go very well for us. But a lot of people are projecting that if they don't stay undefeated, or at the very least, even if they don't stay undefeated, they would have to win the MAC title to get into the tournament, which I think is a little crazy. I think maybe the analytics community is overvaluing some power conference teams a little too much, but it's a really weird world out here where I think we could potentially not see either I mean, obviously if they're undefeated, that means they win the MAC title, but I was kind of banging the drum for the possibility of a two-bid MAC where maybe we get undefeated Miami loses to Akron in the MAC title game, and then now you get them both in on some double-digit seed lines. I think maybe we've gone a little too far. This is my take on this. We've gone a little too far with respecting things like the net with Ken Palm, with Bartorvik, and every other metric system we have out there. Like, are we just forgetting that you should be rewarding teams no matter what level they play at for winning 35 plus games, which is likely what's going to happen with Miami? Are we disrespecting these teams even if they're not, top 20, top 30 teams? I get it. Do teams not deserve top 8 seeds for winning this many games anymore? Is that just where we're at?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing we talked about in the college football playoffs. Is like, I know they both got like boat raced, but they deserve to be there. JMU and Tulane deserve to be there. You have to make the regular season matter, and especially in basketball where you have 68 slots now, where like what is the point of like disrespecting a team that crush the regular season so that you can put a team with like 10 losses that's in a major conference, and like I feel like we just have the same argument. You have to make the regular season matter. That's the whole point of playing. If you're not going to give a team like this a bid because they had a great regular season, then why are we even playing the games? Why not just pick your analytical rated teams on day one, and those are your tournament teams?
Yeah, it is ridiculous because, like you said, I understand the college football argument to a certain extent when it comes to the 12-team playoff. Okay, there's only 12 spots, and football is a sport where there is just such a big talent gap. Number one, this is basketball. Anything can happen. I mean, one guy gets hot one game. I mean, how many times? We love it, right? Like your Golkis of the world for Oakland, or, Georgia Southern or Georgia State, whoever that was that knocked off Baylor, and Yale knocking off all. Like, I could go on for days about all the great upsets. So why do we not want these teams and to reward them for their efforts, right? Like, I'd understand if I was trying to pitch, 4-loss teams out of the MAC, but if this team's a 1-loss team, it's crazy. It's just disrespectful to even consider the fact that they don't deserve the reward, especially if they happen to just slip up in one game in a conference title game. We reward Power 5 teams all the time who lose in their conference title games. It's like, okay, great, who cares? We'll still let you in. We'll still keep your seed.
Like, and 7 or 8 losses.
Yeah, exactly. And I do not need to see that spot. It'd be one thing if it was like, okay, we're going to have to give away Miami of Ohio spot so we can let in, a second team out of the A10. Okay, one mid-major dies so the other can live. Fine. But what it would be so we could let Georgia as the 9th team out of the SEC, who has no chance of winning the title either. So I hope it doesn't happen. I think it's a little crazy. I think that the committee, while they've started to lean more into analytics, I do think they have at least shown a track record where they will reward these teams. And now maybe this could all be a moot point. Maybe Miami finishes the season undefeated. Maybe they win the MAC. I just think it would be very interesting to see if that one scenario plays out where they have 1 loss or no losses going into the MAC tournament, but end up losing to a team like Akron, especially Akron, who is actually a solid team as well. I'd be curious to see how it plays out. I hope it doesn't happen. Same thing with St. Louis. I really hope St. Louis, I think they're safe no matter what, but I hope they don't get screwed if they slip up either. Like, that's another team who could easily slip up, and it could ruin what would have been a very fun tournament team. So hopefully that stuff doesn't happen, but I guess we'll see how it goes. I'm an analytics guy, but maybe this level of analytics is kind of not so good for sports, at least at the moment. So we'll see how it plays out.
It's a different analytics. It's just like I said, it's just a baseline of like, why would you reward the 10-loss team that just because they play in a big conference? Have the team that, had a great regular season and, doesn't usually make the tournament. Like the 10-loss mid-major school is not winning the tournament.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, because the whole analytics argument in football is get the best teams in there because we want to give them all a shot to win. But in basketball, this tournament is it's not best to find who the best team is. Like the NBA knows that. That's why they play 7-game series. You want to find out who the best team is, you play a bunch of 7-game series. In a 1-game tournament sample size, you're already not giving these teams the best chance anyway. So who cares if, again, the 9th team out of the Big 12 or the SEC can't get in? Who cares, right? Like they weren't winning it anyway because they're really not the best team. So I 100% am on board with that. It really the most unfortunate part, I guess, to wrap this discussion up is it makes me root against fun upsets. So like usually when you watch these Power 5 conference tournaments, you want to root for the teams who, they're sitting on the outside of the bubble, and the only way they can get it is winning their conference tournament, but it ends up just bid stealing from all of these more fun schools. So then it ends up making me a fan of the chalk. It's like, I don't want to root for the chalk, but if it means that's the only way you get your Miami of Ohio's in, then I guess that's what it is. Like, then if I have to pick, I'd rather see the 9th Power 5 team lose than, the second school out of the MAC. So I guess that's what it's done to us, is it's made us fans of chalk, which I hate being. All right, so then final, kind of just a fun story. I know Drew unfortunately had to drop out, but he wanted us to talk about this, so we'll talk about it real quick. There was a fight, and when I say a fight, like a legit fight in the Big East. It was St. John's and Providence. It involved Bryce Hopkins, who used to play for Providence, now at St. John's, went up for a layup. Guy on Providence, like, clobbered him, like, absolutely went up, tried to knock him down. Benches cleared, guys got out, some punches were thrown. It was kind of awesome. I'm not going to lie. It was kind of awesome. I mean, you obviously never want to see people get hurt, but like when you talk about classic Big East, like actual 80s, 90s, nasty Big East, like that's what it was built on. And then the fact that you have Patino involved, who is now the coach of St. John's, used to be the coach at Providence. He's an old school Big East guy. I mean, I'm not saying we need fights every game. We don't. It's not great for the sport. We could do for a little more of this, especially in a very stinky Big East. This was kind of awesome. And I think they play each other again this year. So, oh, baby, get the popcorn ready. This could be fun. So that's our take on everything going on this last week. We're going to look ahead in college basketball here. We've got like 5 or 6 plays circled. Drew, I know you have a few of them for us. What are you looking at? I know we don't have numbers yet, but what are you looking at this week that you're going to have your eye on to play on coming up this week?
Yeah, I'll start in the ACC. I am looking at SMU, who gets Louisville at home on Tuesday. Now, this is purely a fade on Louisville. I have been wanting to look and fade this team. Looked at Baylor on Saturday. They end up losing, I think, by like 12 in that cross-conference matchup with them. But this is a Louisville team that's been running really hot shooting-wise. I think they're in for some regression. They shot the ball really well against SMU a couple weeks back when they beat them by 14, but SMU was up at half in that game. They were in it most of the way. I think this could be a good spot. Not sure what number we'll get, but I like SMU on Tuesday. Other spots, I'll go to the SEC. I like Alabama at home against Arkansas. Arkansas has been padding their numbers a bit here the last few weeks, playing the dregs at the SEC with LSU, Mississippi State, South Carolina. I think this is a tough spot going on the road against Bama. I'd love to see what number we get there. And then one other one in the SEC, I'm looking at Missouri against Vandy on Wednesday night. Been waiting to fade this Vandy team for the last couple weeks. They were a team that I was pretty high on going into the year, but I think we could get a good number with Missouri at home against Vandy on Wednesday.
All right, so then a few more plays I'm looking at here on my card is, first up, Monday night, big matchup again in the Big 12, Houston versus Iowa State. We have Iowa State coming off of a pretty dominant performance at home against Kansas. It's going to be a quick turnaround. In comes Kelvin Sampson and this Houston team. And while I think Iowa State is a very good team in the Big 12, I do think Houston is just the better team here. I think in a coin flip game, a team that travels well on the road, they play defense, they have Kingston Fleming who can light it up, they also have some shooters they haven't had in years past. I think in this coin flip game, coming off of a big win, it's going to be a little bit of a tough spot. I will take the Cougars in what I think is just kind of the separation between the top and the very top of the Big 12. So I'll take Houston in that look. And then we talked about it already, but Arizona playing at home against BYU. We saw this team pretty much handled BYU for 38 minutes, and then all of a sudden BYU came storming back, managed to cover if you had the 3.5 in their previous matchup. But that was on the road, coming off of 2 losses. I know the number's probably going to be a little inflated for Arizona, but I think this is a get-right spot for them in the middle of this gauntlet run that they're on. I think we're going to want to look the Cats. Again, it's going to be number dependent. We could end up seeing double digits, and that might scare us off. But I think it's going to be a good spot for Arizona. And then finally, it's not till next Saturday, but I just want to highlight this because if you want to talk about like the title fight type of card that we're going to have in college basketball, it's going to be this Saturday. We've been blessed with this weird ACC Big Ten like non-conference thing these last couple of weeks, but we get the creme de la creme of it this upcoming Saturday where we get Duke versus Michigan. And with the 2 losses from Arizona, it's going to be number 1 versus number 2. You're probably going to see number 1 Michigan versus number 2 Duke on Saturday. And if you don't think that's enough, leading into that, you're going to get to see Arizona versus Houston. So we could legitimately see the top 4 teams in the country. This is a Final Four level weekend we're getting in the middle of February. I don't know what the numbers are going to be. It's all going to be dependent on what happens this week. So I can't tell you where I'm going to be looking, but I know that these are games you're going to want to have on your TV. We're going to be looking at them. You'll probably see clips from us later this week when we actually break down these games, but absolutely all eyes on these games. And they have them scheduled perfectly. One is in the afternoon and one is in the evening. So please, 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 if you're going to watch 80 college basketball this week, watch those two games. That's what we have our eyes on. All right, well, college basketball was fun this week. I think there was some fun discussion on a lot of different topics that we had there. What was not fun this week is the NBA. Like, let's just call a spade here. The NBA has a product problem. Their product is not good right now. And it was encapsulated by the fact that All-Star Saturday happened, which All-Star Saturday used to be awesome. The three-point contest, the dunk contest, the skills challenge. It used to be the prime Saturday night. Make sure you're seated. It happened at like 3 p.m. I didn't even realize it was on. I don't know if that's because, TNT lost the rights. Now it's buried on Peacock under, like the Olympics or whatever the hell's going on. But it was like 4:30 and I was seeing clips of the dunk contest already happening, which is just crazy. I mean, it's not like it was anything we missed anyway. You had Damian Lillard win the three-point contest, not playing a single minute this year. You had, I think it was Keyshawn Johnson win the dunk contest. So, like, what is All-Star Weekend now? We'll talk about the bigger issue they have with their product here in a minute, but, like, is this not just an encapsulation of what the worst regular season in sports is? Like, I think that's where we're at. This is just the worst regular season in sports. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the NBA is, one, obviously we've said too many games, but TV contracts, all that stuff like factors into that. I think the biggest problem is they just have 30 teams make the playoffs, play in, whatever you want to call it. So like when 2/3 of the league is making it, you'll have like maybe a couple of teams that are fringe that are like, have to play hard every game. You'll have a couple of teams that are at the very top that need to kind of stay at the top, but like at a certain point, they're just too far ahead of everybody. And then you'll have a bunch of teams that just suck and don't care. And just want to draft higher. That's what it is. And it really creates this like piss poor product, as we've said multiple times, of just, you can't watch the regular season. Now the playoffs is very entertaining because there's like 30 teams. It's very long. There's a lot going on, but the regular season just woof.
It's bad. And the tanking problem, we're not the first to cover this. We're beating a pretty dead horse here, but it's bad. And I mean, like what the Jazz did, pulling all their starters to try and lose a game, and some of these other teams just fielding absolute practice squads to make sure that they lose to other bad teams, and then only, getting the roster ready to go when they play OKC. So it's like, hey, we can have everybody play tonight because we know we're not going to win. It's crazy. It is so blatant, which when you compare it to some of these other sports, I know, in baseball, there are teams who just constantly are fielding bad rosters. I mean, we've seen the White Sox, we've seen the Rockies in previous years, but at least on any given day, a baseball team can win just by the nature of that sport. So on a day-to-day entertainment basis, it's not totally terrible. And then, I mean, in the NFL, like tanking is just so hard. Like there are bad teams in the NFL, but you just never see this type of behavior. Like the NBA is the one sport that really has this problem. And I get it. It's only 5 guys on the court, and it's just so dependent because, on one hand, you're tanking and then you necessarily can't quickly turn around because let's say you don't get the number 1 pick because of how the draft lottery works, you're just back in the same spot again. I understand all that, but you're 100% right that the issue is you have 20 teams that make the playoffs. So most of those teams are going to be resting their guys, trying to make sure no one's hurt for the playoffs, and the other 10 want the number 1 pick. It's like, it's such a bad dichotomy. And I agree. I think that I've been on this train for years. They need to shorten the regular season because I think games would actually matter more. And it would mean you don't have to play back-to-backs. It would mean you can have guys ready to go. It would mean that if teams want to tank, it would happen later in the year because they'd be alive longer into the season. I think that would be a solution. Now, that's never going to happen because there's too much money involved in playing all these games. But I don't know how to fix it. I really don't. I know there's like some complex stuff. But the other problem that I have with this is it makes like what are supposed to be marquee games not marquee. I mean, you talked about it earlier, that Lakers Spurs game. Like that's supposed to be a big primetime matchup, and it just ended up being awful. And that's not new, especially with all these big contracts. It's like you're paying all this money to have these streaming services, or God forbid you pay to go to a game. It's beyond awful, and it's such a bad product that like I've kind of gotten to the point where I just won't watch. I'll follow the sport because we're obviously sports fans, but it's bad.
Yeah, and it just makes it like, obviously you can't just look at it from a betting perspective, but that is what we do on this podcast. It's just like makes it impossible to bet on a day-to-day basis because you don't know if a coach is going to decide, hey, let's have this guy come off the bench who usually plays 35 minutes, or oh, we're only going to limit him to 20 minutes, even though he's not hurt. He just you want him to rest, and like, it can go for you if you're betting his under, but like obviously screws you if you bet his over. And then also just the, if they even smell in the third quarter a 15 plus point game, all the starters are gone. They're like, we're not going to worry. We're not even going to try and come back. Like, and that's just the thing, like you said, of just the games don't matter. So like, if you're down, you're just like, oh, pack it in. Let's go to the next game. And it just makes it impossible to watch. I don't like, I'm betting it, and I find it really hard to watch some of these games. And like you said, there's just no key matchups, because the only interesting games, I guess, are like Spurs and OKC, because they just are feuding this year of who's actually the best team in the West. So like,
yeah, I mean, I guess, a week ago or whatever it was, we got that OKC Denver game. Like, that was fun, but it's, yeah. I shouldn't have to once a month get a good matchup until April. It's disgusting.
Exactly. It's just really tough. Like you said, I don't know what the solution is. Less games, in my opinion, I think would be better. So you don't have to play back-to-backs. You can actually have rest without needing to sit a full game out. But as you described, I think the real losers here are the people that pay money to sit in the stands and have like 4 starters not playing that game.
Yeah, it's bad. And then like, it's just getting more expensive. I don't know if you saw this news. Apparently, like, the Rising Stars game on Friday, they had like jacked the ticket prices up, which, like, that's supposed to be an all-star event, right? And it was like, there was no one there because the ticket prices were too expensive. That's supposed to be a fun game where you get to watch young guys you might not realize are as good as they are. You don't get to see them because, let's say you don't have a league pass and you're not following the league, and all you do is watch these marquee games where, for better or for worse, you get the same 8 teams on ESPN and all these primetime games because they want to sell the stars. Rising Stars is supposed to be where you get to see some fun guys, and it's probably the best product left on All-Star Weekend, when they're jacking up the ticket prices, and it's like 12 people there, and then they play it on Friday night, and no one sees it. I don't know. I get that the game is growing internationally, but you want to talk about a league that I think is at a very big fork in the road as far as like what it's going to look like in 5 years. It is a little worrisome. And like you said, I know you don't want to just look at it through a betting lens, whether you like it or not. And it's not even just because we're on the show. Like, that's where everything's going with prediction markets and all this stuff. Like, that is what's going to make your sport have a longevity. You can't have a sport where it's just an hour before the game, everybody's out, and it just shifts the entire landscape. Now, when guys don't play, you get your money back. No one's hurt, but it's like you just took the one thing I could do to enjoy the game, or somebody could do to enjoy the game, and you just removed it from them. It's woof. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, and especially because there's a lot of upcoming like talented players that are young, that are like people are like looking at like Cooper Flag, Wembanyama, Shea, like all these young guys that like could be, top 5, top 10 players in a couple of years. And it's just like, even they're resting, like they haven't even been in the league, and they're like sitting like a third of the year. And it's like, you're just taking away this, with all the talent is in the league right now. There's a lot of good teams and a lot of fun games that could be played, and you're just taking it away.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess perfect example was the Blazers the other night. It was like that last day before the All-Star break. There's only like 3 or 4 games. And I get he's coming off of injury, but they set Denny Advia. Like, that's a guy who, if you're not a pretty big basketball fan, you have no idea who he is. He's an all-star this year. He's a good player. He plays in Portland, so he's kind of buried. And all of a sudden, he's not playing. Like, maybe there were people who were going to tune into that game, whether it was from League Pass or, NBA Network, whatever it was. And it's like, that just isn't good. Because, yeah, you're right. Like, at the end of the day, people know who Shea is. He's the reigning MVP. There's no surprise to that. Wembanyama's a freak. Cooper Flag, we all saw playing in college. He's going to be the rookie of the year. If they don't play, oh well. But like, this next level of guys that, like, I get if you're a team like Portland, you're going to protect him because he's the best thing you've got. But it's like, let that guy shine. You know what I mean? Like, it's worth putting that product out there so people can see it. And it's just, again, how am I supposed to become a fan of the league when I just don't even know that all these guys exist?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's enough caterwauling. I think we've kind of railed against the NBA enough. At the end of the day, like you said, this is a betting podcast. We're going to continue to bet the NBA whether we like it or not. We're stuck. We're addicted. That being said, we do have some time off. So you're going to get back in the lab this week. I think it's Thursday is the next time you're going to see games in the NBA. So we have a little bit off. The college basketball guys will get to put out some clips. We'll make some plays. But you'll be back Thursday with a full slate of games. What do you kind of have cooking up and that you want to tease for people, not only this week, but basically the rest of the season? What do you got cooking up? What are we looking for?
I'm excited. Last week, tough week. Like I said, a lot of people sitting out, but, we're We're going to refocus, get back into this will be the exciting time of the year where a lot of teams are playing for playoff spots and stuff like that. We're going to be hitting some rebound ladders, one of my favorite bets. Get a lot of value there, and add in some other plays here and there. But I'm looking forward to Thursday.
Awesome. All right. Well, that'll kind of be the tease. Obviously, again, a little bit of a shorter NBA week, but that's just because it was kind of a nasty week. We don't have a ton to look forward to till later in the week. We'll be back next weekend, and we'll really kind of dive into the NBA. And I think we'll do a full reset because now we kind of have the full picture of where teams stand, which ones are real contenders, which ones are fake contenders. And, as the playoffs start to ramp up, things get really more exciting. So I think that's when we'll really dive into stuff, and it will give us more chance to find more value. And I think at the same time, it will eliminate a lot of the frustration, which is good because at the end of the day, we want this to be a fun hobby that we all partake in. We don't want this to be a frustrating hobby. So we'll definitely make sure we're locked in on those.
Also, I'm gonna start looking into more of like the future side of it. I know we talked last week on the podcast about like teams we like out of the East, winning the East. Now that the trade deadline settled in, we got those teams that got all their new players. We'll look into it, see which ones are real contenders to win that and which ones aren't, and see if we can get some futures out there for you.
Yeah, that'll be fun as well. And then the other thing we'll do, talking futures, kind of wrapping everything up here, is these next couple of weeks with college basketball, we'll touch in on those as well, because now we're in the serious time where you can really start talking about Final Four. You can talk about conference championships. You can talk about national championships, all the different ways you can play futures. So I think these next 5 to 6 weeks will be big for the futures market, because really by April, we're into NBA playoffs and we're done with college basketball. So that's when all these futures really have to come home. We have a lot of the data points. So we'll grind through all those over the next couple of weeks, and we'll bring anything that we see real value on to everybody, so that way you can see exactly what we're thinking and maybe hop along that ride with us as well. Well, there you have it. Going to be a shorter episode here. Again, NBA slate didn't do us any favors, and we covered all the major college points here, but we'll be back again next week to do it all again. Obviously, Drew had to hop off a little bit early today as well, so we got his thoughts on a few of the plays he likes coming up this week that he'll be keeping an eye on. I threw out some that I'll be keeping an eye on. Jake did say he'll be ramping back up into the NBA prop market once games resume on Thursday, so all of that stuff will be coming your way. Make sure you stay tuned, not only here to the YouTube channel, but follow us at There Will Be Bets on every social media platform. That's where we're putting out our daily picks. You're getting college basketball, you're getting NBA, and even when the other sports fire up like MLB and we get to some of these big golf tournaments, we'll throw in some other stuff there if we like anything. So that's where you're going to get the bulk of our plays, given the way the basketball schedule works versus the football. So make sure you stay tuned, go subscribe on YouTube, and then tune in at least on 1 or 2 of those social media platforms, wherever your preferred platform of choice is. But otherwise, if you did enjoy the video today, please go ahead, leave a like if you stuck with us here through the end. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell as well, so you keep getting our weekly episodes where we do more of our high-level discussion and breakdown. As we said, we're going to be giving out some futures over the next couple of weeks. Those are all going to be here, so you don't want to miss those. And at the end of the day, it's where we just give a little bit more of insight that we can't put into a clip. So you're going to want to stick around here every week as we cover the rest of basketball season and continue this journey with us. So as always, whatever you're wagering on this week, we want to wish you best of luck, and we'll be back next week.
Let's have a week.